Hi, everybody. Welcome to Heathen Talk, Season 2, Episode 6, Take 2. Real quick, just in case our YouTube live stream, which took a giant crap on us, thanks, Google, didn't pick it up. Tonight's episode is brought to you by the Arlington Viking Days, which takes place the first weekend of October. Fun. There's going to be vendors. There's going to be HEMA demonstrations, which is the what did we decide it meant?
I think it's historical European martial arts. I think
they fight with real swords. It's cool. If you're interested and this is a period of history that you're really passionate about, please go and check it out. We are thinking about having a Heathen Talk booth there, so I will keep you updated on that. Thorin has a pub booth coming up at Schulte's New District tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And as always, come see us, come make friends.
And it is family friendly.
It is always family friendly.
Lauren, were there any other events?
Oh, we got quite a few. Try to get through them pretty quickly here. First of all, Central Arkansas Pub Moot, that is my kindred, Blackberry Kindred. We're going to be back at Cregan's on September 17th at 1 p.m. in North Little Rock. Not to confuse everyone who came to Little Rock and realized they were in the wrong spot. Family friendly. They have some... After that, we have the Sacramento Heathen Fellowship will be at the Sacramento Pagan Pride Day. That's the 17th and 18th, same weekend as ours. That's going to be in Fair Oaks, California. They're going to be out there promoting their group and, kind of their more inclusive heathenry. And they will have swag. And once again, please send me some and I'll wear it on air. We have if you're in Eugene, Oregon, there is going to be, Keno's Kindred is going to be hosting an Oktoberfest September 20th at Alton Baker Park. Of course, Arlington Viking Fest is coming up, and then my dear friends with Bifrostway Kindred are going to be having Midwest Winter Moot November 2nd through 4th in Osage Hills State Park in Oklahoma. You want information on any of these great events that are coming up, go to our website, heathentalk.com, click events at the top of the page, and we have a ton of information. If you want to submit your event, we will advertise it for free. So do the same thing. Also, there's also links to all our social media. You guys hear it all the time. So go there. Patreon if you want to support us. There's swag. I got the stickers in, and they look amazing. The only unfortunate thing is they're already on the car. So I'll post a picture. So you definitely want to do that, and that's all we got, Josh.
All right. Thorin, I believe you have the information for the person we're toasting tonight.
I do.
If you just tell us, we're running a bit behind.
We are running a bit behind, but okay. So here we go. This time we actually did get a toast request, which is always great. I highly encourage you guys to send in your suggestions for who we toast. This request was sent in to us by Martin Carr of Runthborg Kindred. I hope I said that correctly. I didn't catch where they are out of. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So he sent us in his kindred brother, Michael Markowski, and his work with their local heathen study group called the Alpha Bros, which he assures me is not nearly as brositude as it sounds, and there's a long story behind that name. Said it's not a kindred-specific function, but it's open to anyone that cares to attend and covers a wide range of topics that are that come along with heathenry. I can definitely attest to the fact that arranging things anywhere, even remotely like that, is in fact, as Martin pointed out, like herding cats. So I have great respect to anybody who can start one and keep it going. Martin, thank you for sending that in, and to Michael Markowski, thank you for going and doing in your area and getting people together. Here's to you.
Hail.
So, Josh, what are you coughing up there?
I am coughing up the Mortal Kombat Raiden Imperial Saison, which, as terrible as that sounds, is actually quite good. Unless you breathe it. It is not breathable. Do not breathe this beer.
You know, I passed that one by like for 2 months on the shelves at the store, and then one day I was in there with my wife, and I dragged her over to show her that they existed because there's a couple others in the line. I've seen
They have an IPA.
Sub-Zero.
I passed that one up.
I've seen Sub-Zero, which I think is the IPA, and then they have an Imperial Stout, which is Scorpion. I haven't gotten that one yet. But when I dragged her over there to show it to her, she encouraged me to go ahead and get one. I also got the Raid and the Imperial Saison, and it actually is really good. If you look on the bottle, like I think towards the bottom, I want to say it's a local brewer.
It's brewed in Washington by
it's not American. It's like
Sound Brewery.
Say that again.
Sound Brewery out of
Sound Brewery.
Hillsborough.
Okay.
It's really good. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's definitely a good saison.
And it's a bottle I'm going to hang on to because it's Mortal Kombat.
So,
Lauren, what are you drinking?
I am actually drinking a black mint tea. It is from my trip to Seattle. It's actually from Market Spice in Pike Place Market. Really good mixture of black tea and 2 or 3 different types of mints. I'm really enjoying it. Really good, really kind of like mild if you're a teener, herbal teener. It's really, like I said, it's one of the better mint combos I've had, and I'm probably gonna have to order some more pretty soon because it's really good. And I've drank almost all of it that I bought. So yeah. Thorin, what you drinking?
Well, I, like Josh, I'm also drinking a saison. Fortunately or unfortunately, mine is not branded by Mortal Kombat. Mine's from the American Brewing Company, and it's simply called Honor. It's a saison aged in red wine barrels. Now, it's a pretty good saison, but what's really kind of cool about it, what ultimately kind of tipped me into getting it, is that all the proceeds from the sale of this beer goes to the Fisher House. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's a charity organization that sets up houses at the larger VA facilities around the country. And the purpose of that is when a returning veteran is seriously injured and is going to be spending a lot of time at the hospital, at the VA facilities, there's a good chance that his family doesn't live anywhere near the VA facility. And that sucks. Dude's been overseas for how long now, comes back injured, and you're still far away from him. So they have the Fisher House where their family can go and stay for free during the soldiers' recuperation.
So it's a VA version of the Ronald McDonald House, which is something most people are very familiar with that at children's hospitals.
Sort of, yeah. And as far as I know, I don't believe that Fisher House is actually run by the VA. Which is honestly a vote in its favor.
Yeah.
I think any vet listening here understands exactly the hate affair we all have with the VA. So yeah, but it's a completely charity-run effort, and I am one of those people who's really leery about giving to just about any charity because you always end up finding out how much of your money doesn't go to it. This is one of the few charities that I give to without reservation. I always know where my money's going with this one, so I had no problem buying that beer because I get to drink delicious beer and Fisher House gets money.
They are actually a top-rated charity, a 4-star charity for 12 years, and they are part of the United Way. Just some facts there. And they not only do the houses, they also do hotels for people who need to go places where there aren't houses, as well as scholarships for children of veterans.
Yeah, see, the one unfortunate part that I do know about the Fisher House is that there's not enough of them, and there are waiting lists to get to them. So the more you donate, the more they build, and the more families can be.
The more beer you drink, the more you donate.
Yes, the more beer you drink, the more you donate, and the more you donate, the more Fisher Houses they build, and the more Fisher Houses they build, the more families can be with their injured vets. So, thank you, Fisher House. The beer's delicious, and thank you, American.
So tonight, we're talking about kind of a subject that it gets kind of divisive. We're talking about the individual heathen and their own personal praxis and how to build that using a reconstructed method, as well as is there such a thing as a solo heathen? I prefer the term unaffiliated, but that's just me. And I'm fairly certain that this episode is going to feature some decent arguments both here and in our chats, comments, and everywhere else. So if you're interested in fighting with us about this, feel free.
And if you're not fighting with us, then somebody's doing something wrong.
Come at me, bro. Come at me. Because this is a topic that I have just a rock solid opinion on. And, it's like how some people have their opinions on, Coke versus Pepsi. Some people just have opinions on things that it's very hard to change. And that's me on this. Because I totally have a hardline opinion on this one, which is weird because I normally don't have hardline opinion on things. But this one, yeah, totally.
By the way, the answer to that is Crystal Pepsi.
The answer to that is never Pepsi.
Crystal Pepsi came back. I used to love that stuff when I was a kid, so I saw it in stores and freaked out of it and bought 2 bottles, and I'm not a kid anymore. It's not offensive, but it's not what I remember.
See, that was the weird. Yeah. So I guess we're going to start out with, Josh, where are we starting out? Because I know where I could, but you are the boss, so I'm going to let you tell me where to start yelling.
You've got something you want to talk about? So talk about it, and I will argue with you, I'm sure.
So let's start with kind of the foundation question. Can you be Okay, so here's the thing, is I feel like a lot of times, because we got into this, so those of you who listen regularly, that we have a Facebook chat among the hosts and the producers, and Mark, our executive producer, and I got into it pretty good this week about this. And it ended up being really a semantics argument, but I want to start here. Is a heathen ever truly an individual heathen? And I'm choosing the word individual very consciously because solo, there's a lot of, but I'm talking about, can you as a heathen ever practice individually solely for yourself? That's my starting line here. So I'm going to take issue with your starting line. And this is because you are. I have plenty of friends who are unaffiliated. And right. I think the biggest conflict that we end up with is the fact that the unaffiliated heathen knows that they're not acting just on behalf of themselves. They know that they have a family. They know that they have a community that they're a part of. But the issue is, and in all honesty, Thorin, Toby, me, and many, many other people are partly to blame for this. We always tell people to go and find a group because you need a group. And so when they hear the word, or when they hear us say you can't be an individual heathen or you can't be a solitary heathen, what they think we're saying is if you don't have a group of people around you who are heathen, you aren't heathen. I need to be perfectly clear that is not at all, at least it's not my position.
Now, I would never go so far as to say that a person without a religious group isn't a heathen. That's, for one, it's not really up to me to say that. But I would definitely say that they're missing out on some vital and fundamental parts of the practice.
Okay, so I'm gonna argue with you on this, Josh, because maybe it may just be the people that we encounter. I know a lot of people who consider themselves, who don't grasp yet that whatever they do is on behalf of not just themselves but their family. And you tell them, think about your tribe, and they immediately get all defensive and don't take into account that, the whole concept of Inengarth is just not just my kindred. It's not just Blackbeard kindred. It's my family, my parents, my siblings, it's my neighbors. Because quite frankly, what I do, if I don't take care of my house, I'm directly affecting them and vice versa. But there's so many people who I have encountered who do like they take and I get accused of having Wiccan baggage a lot, but really it's they try to take heathenry and make it about personal empowerment and not about tribal empowerment because they don't understand
Well, so, and
those
this is where my
concepts.
issue with that is, and I get the feeling this is going to be the one I talk the most in. Um, the simple fact of the matter is that, yes, heathenry is about making your tribe, your group, better.
Right.
But it also carries with it the imperative to better yourself and better your people. And so this false dichotomy of group empowerment versus self-empowerment is useless. In reality, if you're not working to make yourself better, you're not helping your tribe, which means you're hindering your tribe, which means you're doing it wrong.
Okay, but so I'm going to agree and also disagree with you. That's great and all. However, what is your motivation? That is to me, and that, I mean, that's pretty much like the entire thesis of my article, Dear Asa True, that people hate me so much for. My entire thesis is, what is your motivation? Is your motivation, oh, look at me, I want spiritual empowerment, me? Or is your motivation, we? That did not...
See, but here's where I'm differing is I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm saying it's both. You should be seeking to make yourself better. You should be seeking to grow as a heathen in that, and I hate the word spiritual, but it seems to be the one that fits most here. You should be working towards building a house cult, a house practice.
Right.
Because that's going to make you better, which in turn is a feedback loop that makes your people better. So
right.
it's not an either or, it's a yes and.
See, and for me though, the thing is that yes, I think we're talking, I almost feel like we're talking different things. Because I am talking about at the core of my fundamental world view. I consciously make the effort because I'm not perfect. I am just like everybody else. I'm still learning and I'm still adjusting my worldview. I make this conscious effort though when I think about these things, whether it's, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, whether it's, personal change, whatever. I try to direct my thoughts in such a way so that I am not thinking, the focus is not on me. The focus is on the tribe. I need to lose weight. Okay. My motivation for myself, okay, but I try to frame everything in that motivation for my husband, motivation for my kindred, motivation for my parents. That, and maybe, like I said, I have become a pretty hardline tribalist. I have become really, really because that has so fundamentally transformed who I am and made me such a better person. And I am really talking with my hands tonight, which is funny because I've got the camera off. But fundamentally changed me as a person in extraordinary, profound ways that have made me a better person, has been that shift in worldview where my focus is no longer on me. It is on the tribe. And that's where I think there's so many people who, I personally think one of the biggest problems we have today in society as a whole is we get hung up on this. We're selfish, we're narcissistic, and there's this overhang from most religions, and not just Christianity, but you see it in most pagan religions, European pagan religions, I should say. It's all about this personal relationship with the divine. What am I getting out of it? How can I move myself closer to the gods, or to God, or Odin or whatever. It's, I had it beat into me as a child all about my personal relationship with Jesus. And you hear the same thing in Wicca, you hear the same thing in most Western pagan traditions, where heathenry is so different because it's not about me. Yes, I have a house cult, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's just, I'm very hardline about this because I know the profound change it made in me and who I am and made me such a better person that I think it's just a better way to live.
Well, I don't think anybody on this show is going to really argue with the tribalist perspective.
No, and I think the biggest disagreement I have isn't even with the, it's better to live for your folk than it is to live for yourself. I think it's this I think that for some of the people that we converse with, for a lot of people who will straight up tell you, I haven't found the right group of heathens. Or the nearest heathen is a 2-hour drive away, or whatever their reasoning is, right? They feel alienated because we don't make enough distinction between the fact that, yeah, you're missing out on things if you don't have a religious group you can go with. But if you are working towards, and this is a point I want to get to later on in the show, maybe in 15 minutes or so, if you aren't working towards building your own house cult and growing yourself that way, that's when you start really the mistake of missing out on what heathenry has to offer. You have to start looking at that as a way of bettering yourself and your people. And the dichotomy that gets set up of, oh, you're a solitary heathen, you're doing it wrong. Maybe they're not. They're living in their place with their people and doing the best that they can. And they may be missing out on something, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily doing it wrong.
But I want to throw something out here because so I know that in general, we like the use of the word tribe. And sometimes I really don't like that word because I wish that there was a way, I don't know, to me, I feel like sometimes the word tribe gets misunderstood. And I wish I could convey, I wish I had the means to convey better that it's not just about heathen groups. It is, I mean, whether my parents are not. My parents are Southern Baptist, as Southern Baptist as you get. And yet, when I approach the gods, or I have my house cult, or I do whatever, doesn't matter what, I am a representative of them. And that's the point I just want to get across. If nothing else, you're not alone. You have your ancestors, you have your family, I agree with you, Josh, develop your house cult, but you're never, in my opinion, you can practice alone, but you're never truly a solitary heathen in the way the world works.
Okay, I mean, when we talk about that particular discussion, that misunderstanding, I suppose one thing that should get brought up, and it doesn't work very well in actual voice conversation, and nobody really bothers with it via text, but we are talking about the concept of big T and little t for tribe.
Yeah.
We are.
You have to, English is partly a contextual language, so you have to kind of pick up on the context.
The problem is that new people don't, because
I know new people,
yeah.
But that's why you need to shut the fuck up and listen. Oh, sorry, we didn't even hardly get half an hour into the episode before that happened.
But
I'm not. No,
really valuable advice. I'll reiterate this. There are people who have been doing this a long time. There are people who have been working really hard at this for a while. if you are brand new to this, learn. Your opinions are great. Everybody has them. Shut up and learn. And it's not speaking down at you. It's just there's a lot to take in. And if you're new, you haven't taken it in yet.
And you know
and
what?
if you're old, you haven't taken it all in yet.
Yeah,
You're just taking more of it in.
To quote my kindergarten teacher, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
But continuing the point that I was trying to make about big T versus little t is part of it is shut up and listen, because this is a contextual language. You'll pick up what we're talking about eventually, and it's all there in the context not of individual conversations, but in the broad spectrum of conversations. When we talk about the heathen worldview and the heathen praxis, in the heathen worldview, paramount is family and ancestors. So you can take that concept, you can extrapolate the idea of family being little t tribe. And you can talk, here is talking about forming religious groups, and you can extrapolate the big T tribe. At least most people can. Some people aren't going to be able to do that, and that's going to go back to, I'm going to go back to the hardcore tribalist mindset and say find a freaking group, because that's the place you learn these things, is from groups. Because you have people, not just random and occasionally faceless voices on the internet like us, but you have actual people there in front of you that can answer your questions in real time, that can evaluate you as an individual and be able to explain things in the way you need them to be explained. Some of the best experiences that I've had in these pub moods have been when complete newbies ask questions and then don't understand the answer, because then I'm forced to explain it in a different way, and it brings everything out entirely different, and it makes it even better for people who might have been listening to me the whole time and might have already thought they internalized what I was trying to say.
And then you get the rest of us chiming in, giving our 2 cents. And
I know.
It culminates in this weird, and it makes sense most of the time.
Generally, yeah.
When you get me, Thorin, and Matt all trying to explain the same concept, we're doing it 3 different ways, and somehow it works.
It usually does. I mean, I think that to this day, of all the Stone Shore pub moods that have happened, one of my favorite guests that showed up wasn't even a heathen. He showed up with his boyfriend, who his boyfriend was a heathen and came to see us, but he was just coming out to see, meet some other people in his boyfriend's religion and learn a little bit about him. And he's asking these questions that, on the face of it, were almost ridiculous, but were asked with such earnestness and genuine curiosity. I mean, he's one of the few non-heathens I've ever heard ask blood sacrifice without having an agenda when he asked. He was just genuinely curious about, the view of the people there. And his follow-up questions were amazing. And in the end, I think that even the heathens that were there understood better than they did going in on all the topics that we talked about, just because this guy was asking such amazing questions, and he's not even a heathen. So
that's just a
and that brings me to a
like
clarification. We're telling you to shut up. It doesn't mean don't ask questions.
Right.
It means stop telling us how to do it. You wouldn't tell your mechanic how to fix your car.
Let me
rephrase. You
shouldn't tell your mechanic how to fix your car.
Mechanic how to fix your car. Probably shouldn't tell someone who has been doing it a lot longer how to do it.
I mean, the flip side of that is that, while you should, listen to the people that have been doing it longer than you, you shouldn't necessarily be afraid to question them. And by question them, we're not just talking about asking questions, but we're also talking about, hey, wait a minute, you keep saying this thing, and I don't see any sense or reasoning behind it. So you really need to back that up. I've had people challenge me on stuff that I have just, thrown out there because it's such an integrated part of my worldview at this point. I don't usually bother explaining the thing unless somebody asks. And I've had a couple of times where I've had to stop and reevaluate my beliefs because of it.
And that's part of the reason we encourage people who listen to the podcast, whether you're a fan or someone who doesn't like us, whoever you are, we want you to question us. We want you to make us explain things, because then we're learning as we're explaining, and you're learning as we're explaining, and everybody's learning, and that's a good thing.
Right, that whole thing about being embarrassed about the way you're doing it 5 years ago, the reason you're embarrassed is because people asked really good questions and made you justify your bullshit at some point, and you realized as you were trying to justify your bullshit that it was bullshit.
Now, I kind of want to toss back to the idea of practice. Because I really feel like how you frame it is so important. Like I said, I'm hardline on this, but you have your house cult. Okay, so there are lots of heathens who don't have communities nearby, and I get that. And I also understand there are people who can't, I'm one of those people that can't drive. And so, yeah, it can be difficult. But, so your house cult, and we've done some shows on house cult. At the same time, I think that probably the most important part of all this is that developing that mindset that is talked about so profoundly. And it's why Culture of the Teutons, the first chapter, describes it so beautifully. That bond, that Frith, big F Frith bond. And between families, and there were no fictive kin. There were, this, because it was such a part of just how it was. Well, there were fictive kin, but there were no, kindreds. There were no tribes. There were no, theodes. There were just families. And so I really, how, I want to ask you guys, what have you done to help make that shift, and how has that affected, I don't want to necessarily hear, how has that affected your approach to your house cult? Like, you don't have to share what your house cult is, but just I like to talk about our thought process, because I feel like that helps people who are challenging their worldviews.
Well, my house cult has actually changed substantially since the creation of Stone Shore. And a lot of that is because Stone Shore exists and I'm the chieftain. So my house cult generally is focused on my family life and the things that make us successful, the things that we determine whether we succeed or fail at things. And as a result, something as monumental to my life as my tribe ends up being a very large part of my house cult now. But that's all in how it relates back to me and the reputation of my family and my ancestors. Some things haven't changed in the face of tribe, but I'm sure that more changes will be coming as my tribe grows and as we as individuals start being more open with one another about our house cults. If that actually answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's my questions are kind of focused on, that thought, like how how do you develop that house cult with the I'm going to use the word correct because I'm right, with that heathen mindset, that correct mindset, that's really, because for people who are isolated, I think that can be very difficult because you don't have somebody to learn from. You don't, and it sucks, but.
And this is where, in all honesty, it would have been impossible to be an isolated heathen 50 years ago. No, we'll go 75 years ago. It would have been impossible to be an isolated heathen in the time of the actual, heathen world. Because there was no way to get that information disseminated to you. What are you going to do? You're going to go read a runestone? Well, you're not part of that culture. You don't read the runes. Now, though, it's really easy for heathens to communicate across the world. Lauren, you're in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And we have a viewer and a friend who lives in Brazil. I mean, we're sharing this information across thousands of miles. And so there's all this opportunity for the individual to learn these bigger concepts. They just have to have a good bullshit meter. That's what it is, right?
That's always what it comes down to with personal praxis.
And like I am gonna be, I said this and got some people pissed off at me this week on Facebook. You don't, online is great and connecting people is great. I mean, I've heard stories from people back when you used to have to subscribe to one of the national organizations, and people would put their information in the back of a magazine. And the difference is kind of profound, but don't let online replace real life. And that's just basically that's just a broad statement to everybody.
Well, I mean, that's the difference between knowing something in theory and knowing it in practice, right?
Right.
And I'm not using the scientific term theory. I know we have a couple of people who are a little bit pedantic in our fan base, but knowing something from a book versus doing it. I've read books on how to make a knife. I've read books on blacksmithing. Thorin has blacksmithed. There's a distinct difference in our knowledge base and our capabilities. You show me a forge, I'm going to look at it and be like, so how do I turn it on?
Where's the on button again?
Yeah, I mean, so we were having our side chat earlier today on Facebook. The Heathen Talk crew was, and we were coming with a lot of examples for that concept. The idea of we probably have one of the few religions that can benefit from the concept of what they refer to as experimental anthropology, which basically means that as heathens, we're reconstructionists. And as reconstructionists, we do rely heavily on academics, on anthropology and archaeology and history. However, that's never going to take you all the way there, and you have to do. Nobody can read a bunch of books and figure out how to be a heathen from those books. They can get a good idea of how to start being a heathen from those books, but you have to actually go and do the thing to figure out what's right and what's wrong, for a number of reasons.
Well, and this is what makes house cult so difficult, right? And Mark and I have talked about it at length. We really don't have examples of how the lay person practiced heathenry. We just don't. Nobody was writing about what Sven did with his wife and his kids way back when. They were writing about what the king did.
Well, yeah,
and what the priests did, because that was big. It was important.
Right, and some of it too is that there are some things that you just don't bother to write about, and I don't even remember what the original context of this example was, but I remember a long time ago I was trying to point this out to somebody. The context was probably literary, but I was pointing out that if somebody's writing a book today and they're going to write something like Bob got in his car and he drove to Walmart. And that's all they're going to write, because it's expected that you know what a car is and how they basically function, and the fact that they go on roads and essentially what roads are made of, and you're probably going to know what Walmart is and essentially what Walmart is when you get there, and therefore have a good reason of why he's going to Walmart. But in the future, somebody's going to, might read that sentence, Bob got in his car and went to Walmart, or drove to Walmart, and have all sorts of missing information. And that's sort of where we're at right now. If you're just relying on academics to get your heathenry, you're reading that Bob got in his car and went to Walmart, but you have no idea what a car is. You don't know what a road is, so you're not entirely sure that roads are even a thing you need to start worrying about, because you don't know the cars go on roads. And you don't know why he got in the car and went on the road, because you don't know what Walmart is.
And that's one of the things that makes your comment about experimental anthropology so apt, is when it comes to house cult, essentially we're reverse engineering, right? We're taking what we know of the heathen worldview from this big picture of, okay, well, we know that the focus was on groups. We know that the smallest unit was typically the family, not, me. And we're building backwards from that to try and find an individual practice that fits that worldview. And it's a lot of experimentation and a lot of trying to get things to work just right. And the simple truth is we're never going to be exactly like it was. Even our big practice is never going to be the arch heathen practice. It's just not going to happen.
Right. And but the only way we're ever going to get to a place that is acceptable is through throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
And occasionally removing something that stuck that shouldn't
have. Yeah, I guess.
Well, and the other thing is that I think, and this is my own personal opinion, if we tried to do it exactly like how they did it, 1,000 years ago, the context of the world is so different that it wouldn't, whereas, well, example, there might be some reconstruction, let's say, of a ship blessing. Okay. Well, most of us don't use ships anymore. So from the worldview, what does that ship mean? Or, to me, it's a lot of my practice is trying to figure out how they thought and how they saw the world, and then applying that to modern practice. Because, you look through the history, their practices changed and evolved as, because the heathen period is not just the Vikings. There's a huge, long, there's a huge period there. So I think that.
Well, and the tricky thing about the heathen period is we know when it ends.
Mm-hmm.
We have no clue when it began.
Right. So to me, it is all about that. Once again, everybody drink worldview, and then applying it to how things work, my tribe, that kind of stuff. But that's me.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's also. Josh, say something because my train just derailed entirely. I hate when that happens.
Real quick, I'm going to sidetrack us a little bit. Robin asked a question. Robin's one of our favorite fans. She traveled all the way from the East Coast to come Cascadia Moot, and we love her for that. And she wanted to know where this idea of essentially non-individuality comes from. What the basis for that is. And I'm going to let Lauren take this one because she made a little happy sound, so go ahead.
You know me. So most of my understanding and where I have drawn this comes from two places. Culture of the Teutons, of course, but also Eagle's Saga. To me, that understanding that when you look through, you read through the sagas. I'm going to read a quote here from Culture of the Teutons because it's one of my favorites, period. And I practically have it memorized. But I know people will argue this, that, and the other, but I think this explains it very well. Briefly, we must begin with kin, the race or family, a gathering of individuals so joined up into one unit that they appear incapable of independent action. As the feeling which unites them, this is one... Okay. But yeah, I mean, that right there. So absolute is the connection that the individual simply cannot exist by himself. A slight loosening of the bond, and he slips down the most helpless of all creatures. And then if you go into Eagle's Saga, which I saw Robin post that in the chat, so I started pulling out my I started pulling out my references here. But I have... Oh, where is it? Anyway, that's the start there. But I mean, there are lots of... I mean, if you read here... I mean, you read through, there's these quotes, and the quote I'm looking for, and I can't find it now, is basically, that, I don't look for a fight now that I don't have as many friends. There's this idea that kinship, that tribe, is safety and security.
Well,
Um,
so I think the most apt description, actually, in a lot of stories about early medieval Europe, and essentially, it's the idea that what is done to someone you share a tie with, whether it's their family or um, a brother in arms or something like that, it has been done to you.
right.
And there's this concept of continuity between peoples. So if something is done to my brother, it is done to me, and therefore, not only is it my brother's responsibility to see that it is made right, it is my responsibility to see that it is made right. And it's my responsibility to hold that person who did something wrong to my family to task.
Right.
I
And
think,
there's,
I think if I were to answer Robin's question, I would just go back to that earlier points we were making about context. I can't think of anybody in any story, any saga, anything in the Eddas, anything in all the various writings that were done directly about the actions of the elder heathens. I can't think of any situation in which anybody acted purely for themselves. They were
and
always acting for their family or their tribal group, whatever form that tribal group took.
one of the other things that often gets cited in this discussion is guild statutes, because guild statutes were built very much from that culture. So, um, they're basically, should somebody, if someone who's a member of the guild kills someone who's not a member of the guild, then the brethren shall help him in his peril of life best they can. Um, Pretty much, they will provide any brother able to help and not helping will be out of the guild as a mythling. And so that, and there's the kind of thing there where it's like, your obligation. And that's where, that goes back into my whole Frith is obligation, Frith is emotions. But regardless, it's so important.
So I want to bring this back a little bit here. Building an individual practice, building a house cult, a hearth cult. How do you go about applying this worldview that places so much importance on the larger groups? And like I said, partially because we just don't know how they handled these situations. How do you go about reverse engineering a house cult from that worldview?
Well, I mean, this is one of the few places. Well, I won't even say that. I was going to say it's be one of the few places in Heathenry where you could get to focus on you, but you still don't really get to focus on you. But you do get to very specifically focus on your house. Your house, your people, your ancestors. I mentioned earlier, the fact that my house cult has changed quite a bit since I formed my tribe, but that's only, as far as that affects my house cult, that's only as the existence of my tribe directly impacts my family. I don't deal with the larger issues of my tribe as part of my house cult. So the very basis of your house cult should be your house. In my case, it'd be myself and my wife. And then, my folks, I extrapolate out from there, despite the fact they don't necessarily live with me. They're my direct family. And then my ancestors, of course. I would say that house cult is largely probably the focus of the ancestor cult in Heathenry.
I'm going to have to completely agree with you there. It definitely, it starts with, when people ask, I've been asked by people that I've been working with about starting to me, like the foundational piece of starting that and reverse engineering is ancestors. because to quote something that Thorin has said on this show, if you get a flat tire, you're not calling the president.
Right. So I mean, I guess try to get a little bit more meat and potatoes in this. I mean, we're all being a bit vague when we talk about house cult, and that's absolutely excusable, and you're going to have to deal with that because house cult is a relatively personal concept. But I'll try to get a little bit more meat and potatoes so that people at least have some concepts to form it off of. Is I deal with things in my life and my wife's life with my house cult. I speak with my ancestors. People get very concerned about, well, how do I set up an altar? And I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. There's really no right answer to that when it comes to a heathen house cult. Mine has a few things that are symbolically important to me. They speak a certain semiotic language. There are keepsakes on it that are important to my family. There is no structure necessarily to it that anybody can follow.
Whereas mine is very minimalist.
Yeah, I mean, Josh's seen mine. Mine's a.
I've seen yours.
Mine's a riot. Yeah, you've seen mine too as well.
Yeah.
Mine's a riot of objects, and I can see why it's there and why it belongs there. I mean, and some of it's rather odd looking. There's, I think, 6 dirty shot glasses, like filthy shot glasses on them, and some people look at those and, just kind of turn away from it, don't ask the question. And the reality is, each one of those shot glasses was offered to somebody who had died. Somebody close to me who died and who joined my ancestors, and that was the last shot in that glass, and I will never clean that glass. It's their glass. Little thing that there's a symbolic representation of Yggdrasil that my wife made. It's important to have a symbolic representation of Yggdrasil on an altar, but I have it on my altar. Things like that.
Well, and so this is a really good point. And I know this is something that Toby said when he was on the show, is your house cult is yours, it's inviolable. What you do in your house is what you do. And, Thorin has stuff on his altar that doesn't make an appearance on mine, whereas I have a candle and a blessing bowl on mine, and I don't think you have candles or incense on yours, right?
Mine?
Yeah.
No incense, but there's a few candles and there's a couple of bowls and plates, and I believe there might still be a little bit of white sage on there that's there for a reason.
Well, and I have on mine, mine is like the weirdest, like, if you looked at it, it just looks like knickknacks, but it's objects that were owned by people, that ancestors, people I'm close to, or things that are strongly affiliated with me. I've got the belt buckle my grandfather always wore, and I've got his like government clearance badge from the 1940s. I've got my great aunt's like huge silver lighter, the old ones like they put on a coffee table. It's just if you look at it, it would be just kind of random. I don't have incense because my husband is scent averse. But I have, there's a few candles and there's soft peppermints because that was my great grandmother's favorite thing in the whole world. So, it's very personal. And then, some people have multiple altars. I have one outside as well for my land whites. I have one indoors that's strictly for my house whites above my kitchen sink, and it's very small, but it's meaningful to me because it's a constant building of practice.
Right. Actually, I think that would be the most defining characteristic of my altar itself, is it has been built. I didn't, start out with a vision of what it was going to be and put all this crap on it. It's been slowly built up over time, and honestly, to a certain extent, the altar for my house cult is a physical representation of the way my house cult itself has been built.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's really funny. If you came in my house, you would see, like in my living room, I have this shelf that's got a Frey and a Freya statue on it. And most people would look at that and think that was my altar. It's not. I just really pretty Frey and Freya statue I have that I like. Um, but it's, it is you. It is your, it is a reminder to you.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's what it is. It's a physical representation of your practice.
Right, and I mean, we all do things a little different. I mean,
Yeah.
anything that hits mine is uh, uh, becomes a ritual item. It becomes a sacred
Mhm.
item. Um,
I mean,
when I lived in when I was younger and had roommates, and between myself and my other roommates, we had uh, large numbers of guests over. After one particular party we had, it became clear that the idea of somebody, just randomly setting a drink down innocently on the altar became a thing. And that's sort of where that started is, oh, hey, that's a sacred space. That's, you just forfeited that drink, Thanks, my ancestors, thank you for that.
So,
yeah,
real
and that's
quick,
totally.
I'm going to redirect us from altars here a little bit because altars are super specific to the person who puts them together and the family that builds them
Yes.
together. The idea of being fultrui or having a patron god, it's something that's kind of fallen by the wayside in standard heathenry. You still see it in a lot of Asatru groups. It's even becoming rare in those groups, and you do in groups that are more northern tradition, as they call themselves. But the question is there a more heathen way to approach that? And I mean, there's lore that specifies that there was an individual who was considered a friend of Thor. I believe he was in Norway, might have been Iceland. And so I want to pose the question to you guys: is there a better way to handle this idea of having a patron or having a god that you're dedicated to specifically, or a god that you approach specifically for your people?
Okay, so here is my thought process. In general, if there is a person who the gods paid attention to on an individual basis, they were either someone like a king, a jarl, somebody who was a leader, a significant leader, not just a like tribal leader like me, but significant leader, or there was somebody who was going to have a really interesting, and I use that in the may you live in interesting times cursed kind of way. You rarely, you know, and so to me that's important. If you want to try to cultivate that one-on-one individual relationship with a god or a goddess, you have to acknowledge that be careful what you wish for. um I personally have an affinity for certain gods. I feel their stories more pull to me, and I enjoy, and I feel like what they represent is meaningful to me. But I personally don't say, I am dedicated to this. That being said, there is some historical precedence of people being specific priests or even slaves dedicated to certain gods and goddesses. Once again, that's a level of life devotion I just don't have to anything other than my family.
Well, and if I can interject here, a lot of that, for instance, I believe it's Tacitus, who a lot of really, really academically minded heathens will tell you to take with a large grain of salt. He tells of the priestesses of Nerthus and how they lived apart from the community until they came into it. And whichever god took on, or whichever priestess took on the role of the goddess, when they went back to their home, she was killed, and as was everyone who went with her into the community. But
Oh
the
yeah, and
communities
they
ultimately supported that. And frankly, we're really not in a place as heathens where we can have Stone Shore, for sure, could not support a dedicated priest who all they did was priest work full time for a specific god.
Yeah,
My group could not support that. I don't know a single heathen group that could.
I was thinking the same thing when you were talking about the cult of Nerthus. I was actually thinking about exactly the same thing. And the fact of the matter is, they would, if you tended, when they did the procession of Nerthus, which I personally think, I don't know, that's one of those things that historically it speaks to me, and it's something that we've talked about doing here. And I know they've done one in Texas, which is kind of funny thinking of Nerthus being tied to the back of a pickup truck, but there you go. But the slaves who tended to that idol that was only out during that procession, when it returned to the island to which it lived, they were drowned. And quite frankly, that's not going to happen. One, two, yeah, I mean, we just don't have the sheer volume to have dedicated anything at this point. That requires a lot. I'm going to say this. That requires a lot more sacrifice and dedication of resources than most groups are ever going to have.
Thorin.
Nobody's going to like my answer.
So give it anyway. That's never stopped you before.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's going to like my answer because it's not an answer. There are a few people that are close to me that know how I would answer that question. And that is how it will always remain. That is a question that, for me and mine, is Thu. And it's closely held Thu. And a lot of people aren't going to understand why that is, but screw them. They don't need to understand why it is.
Can you answer from a historical perspective?
No better than has already been done.
Right.
There are certainly stories that suggest it as a possibility, though the veracity of those stories is often in question. And
so I just want to point out why Tacitus never actually saw or experienced anything that he wrote about. His stories were all told secondhand from soldiers who fought in the area or fought alongside the people they were talking about and then came back to Rome, and he either talked to them or heard their stories third hand.
Well, I'm not even talking about Tacitus necessarily. I'll even go directly with, figures from the sagas or whatnot that seem to fall into that category.
Yeah, let's also not forget the sagas were also meant to be entertaining.
Well, yeah, but I'm just going to point out how much more often you see somebody that seems to have that sort of relationship than you see that relationship actually being reciprocated in the stories themselves. So, point being, I'm not making...
remember correctly, the guy who's a friend of Thor, I don't remember his name, I don't remember what saga it's in, he built a temple to Thor and paid a lot of money, and that was about it.
Yeah, the point I was going to make there is that just because there are ancestors and just because some of them were famous and appeared in these great stories doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't also special snowflakes. I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying that I don't see necessarily any reason to 100% buy what they're saying, buy what they're selling. And again, I'm not ruling out the concept at all. I'm just saying that my personal views on it, again, are for me and those that are close.
My opinion is if you want to do it, knock yourself out, but acknowledge that it's kind of counter to what most people consider as the heathen worldview. Final answer.
But I do want to mention, and I think this is a really important topic to talk about, you do have, and I'm going to screw up the pronunciation of this, and I'm sure there's a Thay that's been watching who is more than likely going to be upset with me, and I know we have a specific fan who always gets on us about pronunciation.
The Yodish. The Yodish. That's just for you, Rich.
Your Kofgada, your house god.
Yeah.
And that is something that, for instance, on my altar, there's a statue of prayer. That's my house god, and there are reasons for that I don't feel like getting into. But that is something that is very much a part of the praxis, and oftentimes it's not even one of the gods as people know them. It's not the big, well-known names. It's something specific to your group, something specific to your people, something important to your region.
Yeah, mine.
And those are all things to take into consideration.
Oh yeah,
Sasquatch, Josh. Tell me it's Sasquatch.
I really want a Sasquatch statue for my.
To me, to me, it is definitely, I honor a regional god. That is a god that was worshipped here long before, us white folks came over, and so but that is the god of this land. That is the god that was worshipped here for years and years and years. So I have no qualms with. I do it separately in a way that would be congruent with how that particular god was worshipped, but it's still, it's part of my house cult. So if you think it's wrong, I don't care. But I do like the idea of Sasquatch. That's kind of awesome.
So just for people outside of the region, there are a couple of things that are lore items that are super important in the Pacific Northwest and Cascadia in general. One is Sasquatch. If you go into a coastal town up here, I guarantee almost every single one has a statue of Sasquatch somewhere.
It's even more common than the arboreal tree squid.
And that's the other one, the arboreal tree squid or the tree-dwelling octopus. These are things that are tongue-in-cheek legends, but they hold a very special cultural significance to us. I have family that swear up and down they've seen the Sasquatch. And so it is super important. And every region has these things that are important to their region that, as heathens, it's important to recognize their cultural significance.
Here in Arkansas, we have a legend and a whole mountain actually named after what it's horribly mispronounced French. If you were to pronounce it in French, it'd be Patron, but everybody here calls it Petitjean. But to me, that is important. As here, she was a young woman who dressed as a man and came over here as part of a French group because she couldn't stand to be away from her husband. And so that kind of dedication and all that, just, I don't know, it's important. It's another one it's kind of a similar thing here, where it's so important, and it's something that we honor here as kind of a regional.
For those that are in the IRC, I did post a link to more information about Octopus paxarbolus, which is the actual Latin name for the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. So if you're curious about that, just follow the link.
There's an overarching theme that we've kind of touched on when it comes to individual practice, right? The elements you're drawing from, the things that make an appearance in each of our individual practices come from not only our personal lives, such as Thorin's shot glasses, but also the culture of where we live. And all of these things are things that make us who we are and make our people who they are. And they're important, and that's where that foundation of your house cult, where your personal praxis is going to come from. It's going to come from the things that make you who you are.
Learn your local folklore.
It comes. I mean, it comes primarily from your family, and then from Big T tribe if you have that, and then from the place that you live in. And it takes at least two of those three things. The one that it might not take is the one that you might not have, but everybody has family and everybody has a place.
Well, and that, it comes down, I told this to Matthew, when it comes to the personal, the house cult, and Thorin touched on it last week with circles of obligation, right? You have the king leads the nation, the chieftain leads the tribe, the head of the household leads the house. They lead that hearth cult. And and then there's the matriarch or the patriarch leads the clan. You have circles of obligation, and yours is your home, unless you're a chieftain or the president of the United States, or depending on where you are, where you stand in society, that determines the level of impact and the level of attention you have to pay to certain things. I don't have to necessarily worry about what the president is doing because I'm a dude in Washington. But I do have to worry about what my chieftain does. And I definitely have to worry about what I do in my own home.
Why I'm always care about your local elections. They're important.
We didn't just run out of steam on this, did we?
No, I think we all got distracted by the t-shirt idea.
Yeah, we did have a question about what about I know we've touched on this, but let's talk about land whites, house whites real quick, as part of individual practice.
That's a tricky one. For me personally, the whites have always played an important part in my religion. And the reason being is I'm around their territory and I share space with them quite often. Mm-hmm. I have, my house whites. I'm surrounded by areas of wilderness that have whites, and I'm fairly convinced there are areas in the places I visit on a regular basis that are urban that have whites, because it just is.
I personally, I very much hold to the idea that there are urban areas with whites, absolutely.
I don't disagree with that. It's a little bit weirder in our area. I know our producer Matthew would agree with me, and I'm sure Josh would definitely agree that Cascadia has a close relationship with its whites. Well, definitely, even among the non-heathens here, there's a lot of offering and gifting.
And Cascadia is a unique region, and I'm interrupting Lauren here, and I apologize, but we're one of those regions where it doesn't matter where you fall, really, the lines or anything like that. We all care about our land because we have the most beautiful country on the planet. We just do. Sorry, it's true.
So I'm going to interrupt you. I live in an area where we are so dependent on our land. We are, Arkansas actually produces more rice than just about anywhere in the world.
Except for California.
No. Arkansas produces more rice and more soybeans. It's our thing. That even the most ardent Christian fundamentalists I know still buy into the old folk ways of the area when you plant. I mean, there's science, but there's also, you plant based on moon cycles. You plant based on, you know, when it's comfortable to sit on the ground and fish. That's when you know it's time to start planting. You know, just stuff like that. We are so tied, you know, that, you know, and parts of where I live in Little Rock, and this has kind of been the observation of a lot of people, there are parts of Little Rock that feel pretty dead, that feel like there are not really any whites. You know, I bought my house based on the fact that there were whites here. You just knew it. You walk onto this property and it's like a whole different ball game. But it is important to us here that people that live more rural areas, people who live in more rural regions, you know, and it really has become more important. You're seeing more emphasis here, you know, even no matter what, because Arkansas, you know, I disagree with you. Arkansas is beautiful. I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and the Ozarks is
Lauren,
there's
I would
nothing else
think
like
a
it.
little less of you if you didn't think your home was the most beautiful place.
And I've been to Washington, and I've been up there. Yeah, Ozarks has nothing on the Ozarks. It's pretty and all, but like I like places with seasons. So,
We've got
Seasons?
yeah,
We've got 2 of them.
we have 4.
Comfortable. I don't understand what's.
We have 4. So,
4.
but yeah,
That's going a little overboard, isn't it?
so I mean, it is, and I think that, but to, you know, to us here, you know, and I would argue that within heathenry, at least in this area, we are probably, I would say, land white focused. You see more white focus than you do ancestor focus, especially when it comes to groups, and it is what it is. But you know, and we cultivate places where, you know, we have gatherings in the same places over and over intentionally, and because we want to develop that relationship with the land. And I think that is super important. And you know, we're about to start a they project in my backyard because of that, because it is so important to us, especially when so many people here, you know, whether it's farmers or it's the people who are employed because of farming, you know, truck drivers, you know, there's just so much of the economic well-being of my area, even here in Little Rock, is somehow tied to farming. And so, yeah, land whites are huge, huge, huge here.
I mean, I will say that all you got to do is live somewhere once that doesn't have any to really feel the impact. And I'm not necessarily talking about urban places. I've lived in a rural place where they've all left and abandoned it, and it doesn't feel right.
It doesn't. And there are some I'll tell you, there's some absolutely beautiful places here in Little Rock that are set aside, that are, you know, parks and whatnot, that are just the most dead feeling places. I used to go to a pagan meetup at one of them, and it was just like, why are we here again? What are we doing here? It was so uncomfortable. That's why you know, it's really funny. We looked at probably 10 houses, and this is the one we chose because I wanted this house more than anything because it had such good land and house whites. I mean, you just walked in and you knew it. And that's probably because the woman who owned this before me, who owned our house, was Shinto. And there's such a similarity between the view of, you know, kind of ancestral and land spirits in the Shinto religion and what we practice in heathenry. Moral of the story: buy your house from a nice 90-year-old Shinto lady.
Well, further moral of the story: heathens like their whites.
We do.
I mean, essentially, you've heard 2 people from very different environments, 3 people from different environments, talk about how important the whites are, and we will all, Thorin and I will argue with Lauren all day about which place is more beautiful and which place places more importance on their whites. The fact is, both places place a lot of importance on their land. For us, it's really heavily about our wilderness, and we do have a lot of farming as well, so there's this interplay that we get. For Lauren, it's a lot of agriculture, and I mean, you got the Ozarks, so it's kind of wild. But
and you've also got areas, we've got a lot of swamp and everything else and the washouts. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to say this as an absolute and probably have people yell at me, and I don't care. My relationship with the whites, my relationship with my ancestors is 90% of my heathen practice, and that's what it should be. I rarely interact with the gods in any way that doesn't involve my tribe, to be more specific. I so rarely interact with the gods in any other way that doesn't involve my oath kindred family standing alongside me.
So, some of you may have noticed that we've gone a little bit over here, and
we started late.
Yeah, we started late because of technical difficulties and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm definitely going to reiterate, call for any last-minute questions as we begin to wrap this episode up. What you got for us?
Do you want to also thank our sponsor? Because and definitely you want to go out and check out the Viking Festival. It sounds like it's going to be a blast, and I'm jealous. The closest thing we have to that here is like a 4-hour drive away, though we may be going. We'll see. That does sound really awesome. So, question was posed. What is the weirdest or most decidedly non-heathen individual praxis you've seen?
Say that again?
What is the weirdest or most decidedly non-heathen individual praxis you've seen?
I mean, that's a huge area to talk about, just because I've seen so many people that have decided they like the idea of being heathen in concept, but not necessarily in practice. So they'll do all sorts of things and call it heathen, but it really doesn't bear any relation to it. So I mean, like, my brain keeps wanting to go back to easy stock examples, such as the Hammerite, but even that has its reasonable elements in actual heathen practice, just because of its age in the early parts of the reconstruction of the religion. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's all sorts of crap I see constantly that's just really super generalized, eclectic neo-pagan stuff that gets the heathen label dropped on it just because people have decided they want to be a heathen, even though they're clearly not.
I have 2 words for you. Yoga.
Say that again?
Runic yoga.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good one.
I was reminded.
Seen people use Stav, and it's not at all a martial art.
Twinkie bloat. Twinkie bloat. And for those of you who know what that is, Twinkie bloat.
Yeah,
that's for you. That's especially for you, Kevin. Runic yoga, I think, is probably the one that I've seen that I'm just like baffled by the most. Or runic yoga and rosaries to the gods. There you go. Yes.
See, the only one I've seen, and it wasn't even slapped with a heathen label, I was at a pagan pride event, and they did an opening ritual. And in the ritual, they invoked a lot of gods all at the same time, including Odin and Morrigan and Loki all together to open this event. And that was and shocking for
Special.
me. But it wasn't labeled as a heathen thing. It was just a pan-pagan ritual, which
I guess seriously shocking examples would be when I'm in. I've been at rituals that were clearly and definitely heathen rituals where people started doing decidedly non-heathen things during them. Such as, being at Symbol and having somebody just out of nowhere just fuck it all up by toasting a Jotnar or something. I've had people. One specific one I can remember was when somebody just straight up started, calling on the Fenris Wolf in the middle of Symbol.
If anyone remembers, and I know we have fans who listen to Raven Radio, there's an old episode you might be able to find if they have their archives up, where Chuck talks about an event where somebody in Symbol toasted an Egyptian god.
To quote our fellow network host here, Ben, there's nothing wrong with Vishnu, but this ain't his party. That's how he usually prefaces it when there's Symbol and there's people there who aren't as familiar. That's great. You worship other gods, fabuloso, but this is not their party. If you don't have a god to hail, you can always just raise the horn and say, "Hail the gods." And that's kind of how we tend to start things. So, but yeah, I got you there. I have seen a lot at pagan stuff, though. For those of you who have any familiarity with Hindu mythos, my personal favorite was the ritual to the great mother goddess Kali. That was the best one. But
well, all right then. So, I think we have beaten this horse to its fullest potential at this point.
Wait a second.
We might end up revisiting this as we learn and grow.
You have to give it just a moment, Josh. I did make a promise to Robin in the IRC. She wanted to see the Yggdrasil from my altar, so I'm not going to show everybody my altar. I will go pick that up and show it. So, continue.
Okay, well, you go pick that up, and I'll continue what I'm saying. We may end up revisiting this subject in the future, as it's a subject that bears continued conversation. I've noticed a lot of people don't understand how to birth cult, and I'd like to work with some people and drive the conversation in that direction at some point. But if you are interested in conversing with us, and please, if you have toast suggestions, send them to us. We're a limited number of people with a limited number of friends. We can only toast each other so often. Please send us people you want us to toast. Super important. We want to toast heathens. It's a tradition. Help us continue it.
I mean, honestly, I talked with the Fisher House earlier when I showed up my beer, and if we hadn't had a good request for a toastie, we probably just would have toasted the Fisher House.
yeah, it's going to get to the point where you're in the 8th round of a bloat that goes all night, or excuse me, a stumble that goes all night, or it's been called a stumble, and you start hailing the candles. Hail electricity! Because we're going to get to that point if you don't help us.
And
so,
we
Robin,
like interacting with you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we like you guys mostly. Mostly.
So, Robin, as promised, this is the wire and crystal tree that I mentioned earlier, made by my beautiful wife, and even it's starting to collect its own assortment of knickknacks. This was also given me by my wife. It's a piece of Iceland spar, which also known as sunstone. There's another piece of it right here that was given me by one of my brothers. This one actually works because it's optically pure. But yeah,
I could go into the reasons why a round one won't work, but that's geology.
Well, round it's round and it's full of planar flaws. So,
right.
You can't actually see through it.
But it goes against the cubic structure of the
yeah,
spar.
but the actual trapezoidal one.
Yeah,
is great.
sorry.
That's all right. No, but yeah, she made this for me several years ago, and it's one of the most amazing things I've ever received. So
So yeah,
It's really pretty. I really like that.
so thank you guys for your patience with us tonight. It's been kind of rough because of the obviously
tech
because of the
switchover.
tech issues and the switchover, but it'll be better next week.
That's the
Speaking
hope.
of, if y'all are interested in some funny stuff, over the course of this following week, or this upcoming week, we're going to be testing YouTube Live. So if you're paying attention to our YouTube channel, you might see us log in and do a test and just bullshit with each other while we'll try and figure out how to make it work. So that could be fun.
It could be, or you could just see all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be fun. Thank you guys for sticking around with us tonight, even though it was a little rough, and for letting us ramble for an hour and a half. That's pretty normal, though.
If you want to give us a like, head on over to facebook.com/heathen talk. Tweet us at heathen_talk. Leave us a message on one of our various blog posts at heathentalk.com. heathentalk.com. If you want to talk to us, email hosts at heathentalk.com, or if you want to talk to a specific person, email Thorin, Josh, Lauren at heathentalk.com. We have our Facebook where we monitor that fairly regularly. If you were watching this on YouTube, you can leave a comment, but as I've told many of you, we don't read them.
No, not on YouTube. That place is a pit of despair and awfulness.
I only read them when occasionally they come to email, and I'm just adding up my list of how many people call me a cuck. So,
as always, we want to talk to you. Please interact with us. We're desperate for your attention.
oh, don't forget about the new subreddit.
And if you have suggestions for new shows, if you want to talk to us, if you just want to, well, I mean, it's our subreddit. If you want to do Reddity things, reddit.com/r/heathen talk.
And seriously, send us show suggestions, because if you don't, we're just going to keep talking about whatever the hell we want to talk about, and we're never going to answer your burning questions.
Ever. To round things off, y'all are doing it wrong.
And you're not the boss of me.
Everybody have a great week. See you next Saturday.